How will your original asset class, investments and loans, how will this kind of financial instruments stack up against all those other assets? What's your prediction?
Sure, of course, if we come from 100% of the portfolio, so today we are managing, or we have under administration more than 600 million euros in assets. Most of that, like half a year was 100% was in loans. Today that is shrinking, and that's going to continue shrinking as other assets pick up. If you look in the loan space, definitely very interesting, but it is very alternative thing as well. So it's not that, for instance, if you look at the real estate, we are talking about perhaps like billions, if not tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of potential market. For loans, it is limited. So we see, yes, from the current, say 400 something million what we have, plus overdue payments, so we can grow it, 2 times, maybe 3 times, 4 times. It's not that it's going to be kind of tens of billions in loans. Especially if we talk about high yield loans. If we talk more about corporate loans, then sure, it's much larger, but then already Mintos offering most likely would not really work that well.
I mean, when we see it in perspective to other asset classes, of course, the percentage is going to shrink. But in absolute numbers, do you see a downshift in the loan offering on the platform?
No, it's definitely, we continue investing. So we now are again gathering the hunting team, and they are going out into the market. So just last week we had a team in Mexico, we had a team in Indonesia. So definitely there is still plenty of loans. I'm more referring to the next 3 to 5 years. In the medium term, sure, investors going to see more lending companies, more established lending companies, which is also what we have changed the focus is to focus on larger lending companies. And there are the minimums we have raised forever, but now we are already quite set minimums what we want to see for the lending companies to have as a book. And there's still quite a lot, but of course if you compare loans to ETFs, well, you cannot compare ETFs is this and loans is
sure. But if we just look isolated on the lending business, what are your internal targets in terms of attracting new lending companies? Which kind of volume do you anticipate from them? Just walk me through your ideas of how you want to structure, let's say, growing also the lending business.
So it's basically some limitations in investor demand. So how much the investor demand would make sense for us now to put 400 million of loans. So that's not going to be funded. So you have to manage both sides so that the investor side is growing and then the loan supply side. Today on Mintos, definitely the constraint is the supply side. So if you go Mintos, there's barely loans to invest in. So we have done good work on the investor side. There's definitely demand. Now we're catching up with the supply side. So for the coming, we are basically planning, I would say 4 quarters in advance. So for now we know, what is the pipeline for the next year. So we do see good pipeline of 15 plus lending companies in that. Not all of them we're going to close, not all of them going to appear on Mintos, but it is a good pipeline, and that's going to be a good addition to the supply, which should be enough for the demand what we see on the investor side.
So far, I would say from the previous months, there hasn't been a lot of new onboardings on the lender side. What would you say are the biggest difficulties in that regard?
I think we started too late to re-engage in those discussions. So the process to connect a lending company today is quite long. So it's not that we can connect it in a few weeks time. So it's usually a few months time. So because we have to do the legal setup, we do the risk assessment, then we do have to write the prospectus, which is then confirmed by the Bank of Latvia as our regulator. So there's many more things which we have to go through to connect the lending company. So we started too late. I guess after the regulatory process finished last August, when we basically passported the license, we just were a bit a few months too late to get new lending companies on board. Which should change now in the coming months. There's a good pipeline and there should be more lending companies.
From your experience, what is the sales cycle roughly from getting out in the market to finally have a lending company visible with assets on the platform?
It's 3 to 6 months. If the lending company is very committed, we can do it maybe a bit less than 3 months. But yeah, I would say 3 months. But usually it takes like between 3 and 6 because lending company also it's one of the projects for them. So they are not 100% all the resource focused on getting another funding source. But they have 3 to 6 months.
What is the progress in terms of recovering defaulted loans?
Overall, it's been steady and happening. Obviously, it takes time. So if you look at the overall, then we have recovered already almost half of the portfolio, which was at exposure, so which is great. But of course, it's still many of the processes are yet to finish, and we are yet to see kind of the final results. And that also explains when you look at the recovery cases that we are not closing down those. So we're not going to close the case if we see that there's still a reasonable chance to recover something. And with many, we actually have recovered 100% of the exposure, with some less, and we actually did the charge-offs. But for most of them, there's still process, and those processes take time. So that's unfortunately with the recoveries, they take time, and those amounts are not small amounts. So we're not talking about like small loan which defaulted and it's like, I know, 100,000 K or like $500,000. So in some cases, unfortunately, we're talking about like millions and 5 million and 10 million plus, and those cases take time.
Mintos used to have regular Ask Mintos Anything sessions, particular about the recovery status. Why hasn't there, let's say, no more frequent updates about it?
Because I guess only you joined, so and maybe a few more investors. Basically, what we when asked also to the feedback. So and also from the numbers and engagements, we saw that the cost what goes into those sessions, setting them up, like getting the questions and so forth, preparing for them in live format as well is huge. And then we see maybe a few hundred investors watching the Ask Me Anything. And then if you compare it to, if you contrast this few hundred, or maybe at best, I think we saw like 1,000 investors watch the Ask Me Anything. But then we do have more than 200,000 funded accounts. So we are reaching maybe like 0.5% of investors through those. So what we switched to, and also reacted to the investor feedback, we switched to the written format, and we provide the written updates.
Can you talk about how many resources you allocate currently for the recovery progress and the collection?
It's both internal, so we do have the legal team. So we actually have a sizable legal team internal of 7 people. So some of them are working quite a bit on recoveries. And then we do have outsourced legal help as well. So there's for each case there is basically a small team which is working on that. But of course, this work is not that you have to work like there's not things happening every day, right? So there is, I know, the court case next month, so you have to prepare for that. There is some documents you have to submit. You submit those, but it's not that like every day in and out you are touching the case.
Do you just have internal staff that is managing the collection, or is there also like external partners that you work with?
All external. We actually spend a lot on legal fees ourselves, so we, most of the case we have external legal help on the ground, because from here we can in a way orchestrate them, but on the ground you need legal help. So legal expenses are actually quite significant expense what we have.
Can you talk specific numbers, let's say for last year, top of your head?
Top of my head would be between $500,000 to $1 million we spent on legal fees.
Right. I want to point out or talk about one particular defaulted lender, Kiku. The biggest defaulted lending company on Mintos, roughly 42 million at risk, defaulted in June 2022. Can you, from your perspective, talk about what went wrong with Kiku?
Russia. I mean, that's the only thing I can say is basically they're acting in bad faith and just took advantage of the situation as a fully Russia-based company. So just decided not to pay. And while you can try to prepare for the situations. You never know, like when the shock moment comes, how people gonna react. And well, we saw that those people who are leading the organization are actually taking advantage of the situation and acting in a bad faith.
The last
Which was by surprise actually to us, because they were super reasonable, like guys, like one of the largest companies in the space in Russia, and like rationally it doesn't make sense what they're doing, but well, that's their approach.
The last public update I saw on Mintos was it's almost a year ago. I'm not sure if affected investors are in a more frequent exchange, but the last thing I saw from my research, not being affected with the Kiku case, maybe that's why, but what I found on the Mintos blog was about a year ago, Kiku was converting the Mintos debt to a non-interest bearing bond. Without any consent or knowledge from Mintos side. What happened in that last 12 months? What's the last update you can share?
Well, the last I can share is that we are working on the case. So it is a complicated case. So it's, like Russia in itself is not easy, especially these days, to do business there. So we can share very little. So we have help there to deal with the case. Not much we can share about on top of what we have shared already. So it is ongoing process. It's going to take time. We are confident that we're going to have recoveries. It's not going to be 100% recoveries for sure, that we know today, but there's going to be sizable recoveries. But it is quite engaging process, and given, of course, all the Russia war, which complicates the process even more, it is taking time.
What is your current prediction in terms of how many funds can be recovered?
I don't know.
Or what's the range at least?
I don't know, top of my head. So I would have to refer to the document which we publish on the website.